McFarland, USA is about a group of young Hispanic teenagers and a white man who moves to a new school to teach. This town, however, is not as advantaged or privileged as other towns or schools. While Mr. White is teaching, he sees a group of young boys running for a long time and sees something special in them. He goes and tells the school principal if he can create a cross-country team with the boys he saw something special in. After Mr. White's wish came true about creating a cross-country team, he starts practicing with them each day. However, the young Hispanic teenagers go through many obstacles. For example, one would be that the fact that these families don't have enough money to provide for their family. Therefore, these young teenagers have to get up very early in the mornings to work at the farm fields. Besides the fact that these students are poor and have to work very hard to make a living, they go through other obstacles like violence and discrimination. All in all, Mr. White helps these students overcome the worst and helps them find who they are. Mr. White helps these boys by teaching them the value of life and brotherhood, and helps them find their passion and who they truly are.
Brown v. Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson, which consisted of separating students based on their skin color. Students were not treated equally, thus creating segregation in schools. After years of unfair treatment, Brown v. Board of Education made integration a requirement. In McFarland, the majority of the students are Hispanic. Therefore, they are allowed to attend any school of their choice. Since integration is a law, they have the right to choose what school they attend. Although Brown v. the Board of Education overturned Plessy v. Ferguson and made segregation illegal, there was still some kind of segregation based on where the students live and social economic statuses. This is called the de facto segregation. De facto segregation is segregation due to the facts of a situation such as neighborhood populations and voluntary separation. This can be seen in the film McFarland since most of the students are Hispanic. This can also be seen when the students from McFarland go out of town to compete against other schools. Mr. White's cross-country team are all Hispanics, while the other teams are mostly mixed ethnicities.
One educational case that can be seen in the film is Plyler v. Doe. Plyler v. Doe was a court case that determined that students who are undocumented immigrants cannot be denied an education. In the article, Immigration Laws Are Education Laws Too by Stuart David, the significance of Plyler v. Doe and the barriers it broke for Hispanics are discussed. In the film, although some of the students are immigrant workers in the fields, they have the right to an education and therefore attend McFarland.
Compulsory education is a topic that we feel dealt with this movie due to the circumstances the students face. Compulsory education is an attendance law that requires students to be in school. This happened because kids were doing child labor instead of getting their formal education. Compulsory education is important in McFarland, USA because the teens were working on farms and sometimes would not show up to school due to the exhaustion they face. A teacher not only has a job of their student getting an education, but a teacher's job is also about making a student safe. At one point in the movie, a student, Tomas, is on the edge of a bridge contemplating suicide. His teacher and coach, Mr. White, sees Tomas ready to jump off, but talks to him in a caring manner and pleads with Tomas not to commit suicide. Tomas finally feels as if someone is there for him and gets off the bridge and cries into Mr. White. Tomas finally feels as if he is worth something thanks to Mr. White. Mr. White never knew what really went on in his student's life before, until one day a parent of one of the teens says how if the teen does not work in the fields, that is food off their family's table. Not only did the parent complain, but also the students were worried about not working since they needed to help their family. Eventually, Mr. White wants to know what it was like working on the fields with his students, so Mr. White wakes up early on a weekend and goes to the field and works very hard. Mr. White didn't know what the student's life was like and was very exhausted after working and realizes that cross country is their only way of becoming something more.
Although Mr. White had no prior experience coaching cross country, he decided to start a team anyway to give students an opportunity to do something they had never done before. Mr. White also encouraged the students to join his team because he saw potential in them and knew they could achieve greatness. Lastly, he felt intrinsic rewards because he got personal satisfaction for winning and helping students.
In order for the students to get into college, they have to get good grades on their SATs. Thanks to Mr. White, the students stay after school and on the weekend to study and get the required grade for their SAT to get into college. Mr. White cares about their future and makes them get a good grade on their SAT. Fortunately, the students get a good grade and some of them attend college and have a successful future thanks to Mr. White.
We can also connect the film McFarland USA to the book Holler If You Hear Me. In Holler If You Hear Me, Mr. Mitchie experiences difficulties teaching in the public school system, often facing many moral issues. Mr. Mitchie also teaches to bring social justice to his school. In McFarland, Mr. White brings social justice to the community by helping a group of boys not only to win at meets, but also help them in life. Mr. White changes the outlook on the boys' lives and ultimately impacts their attitudes for greater. He helps them become better people and athletes.
An issue that occurs in educational practice that affects both teachers and students is that students are not meeting specific standards. Since the students in McFarland USA are not as privileged as other people, they cannot get the perfect education since they are working for many hours on the fields. An issue with this is that students who need to make a living by working are not meeting the standards they should be at school and therefore are getting bad grades and some even drop out of school. This is an issue that affects both students and teachers, and we need to help the students meet the standards at school.
Lack of funding is also a major educational issue that impacts teachers. This issue limits the teachers' resources and can confine their teaching abilities. In the film, the boys needed new uniforms and had to buy them themselves. The boys' mothers had to fundraise by selling tamales to purchase the new, very needed uniforms. Another educational issue that impacts teachers is not having supportive coworkers and administration. In the film, Mr. White had a supportive principal who allowed him to start a cross-country team without having any prior experience.
In conclusion, there are multiple laws, ethics, and issues that make connections both in the film and in real-life situations. We connected the relationships between educational history and laws to current educational practices. We also analyzed how the roles of ethics and dispositions are utilized in the classroom, and in Mr. White's case, in the team's practices and competitions. Lastly, we related many major educational issues that impact teachers to the film. With that being said, these things that occurred in real life helps us become better teachers for the future.